Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Art of Cybersecurity series with me, Chirag Joshi. Now, as some of you who've been following us for a while know, the whole purpose of this show is to bring you insights and real-world practical actionable outcomes from experts that can help all of us in the cybersecurity industry. It's not all about technical skills. There is so much more to cybersecurity. And if you look at the past episodes that we've done, we've had every discussion from legal to storytelling, communication, journalism, entrepreneurship, career development. So it's a wide range of topics around cybersecurity. Now, today, I want to touch upon a topic which I think is really, really important when it comes to making an impact in our roles in cybersecurity. And that is the art of innovation and impact. And to have this conversation with me, I'm so delighted to be joined by Joyce Harkness. Joyce actually is a person of many talents. She has an amazing resume, which is quite which is quite astounding when you think about the journey. She's held the roles of a CIO. She's a cybersecurity advisor. She's run her own company focused on leadership, and she's very passionate about that. She's quite active on LinkedIn and talks about different areas in leadership, impact, innovation. So just a perfect person to have this conversation with. So with that, Joyce, welcome to the show. So excited to have you on.
Thank you for inviting me, Chirag. I am so happy to be here and to share my journey, my experience, and my thoughts about what's going on in this field.
Awesome. Love it. Thank you. And Joyce, with that, obviously I gave a very, tiny snippet of your experience, but would you like to just tell our audience just a little bit about your journey, about your career, and the current roles that you occupy?
Thank you. Actually, I would like to personalize it. You can read my LinkedIn page. But my road to cybersecurity was a zig and a zag. And it really started with me as a process engineer way back. Well, you can age me on this one. At the age of miniaturization, at the onset, I started as a process engineer with Fairchild Semiconductors. And a bit of trivia: Fairchild is the grandfather of semiconductor companies in the Silicon Valley. So the founder of Intel came from Fairchild and many other semiconductor companies. Now, my journey was a zig and a zag because I went through process engineering, customer operations, then business transformation. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back to Australia after a global assignment based in the US, I joined the NBN Co., which even to this day is the largest government business enterprise startup. And that was an amazing experience. The common thread in my career is being curious and just wanting to solve problems. And because Joyce is the person to go to who has a broad out understanding of the business, who knows who to go to, she doesn't know the answer. And if she doesn't know the answer, she will look for the answers and involve others in her journey. So as you can see, that's how my roles came about. Cybersecurity started, my interest there started when I joined the NBN, because we started from nothing. I mean, it was, created by law.
Yes.
And so we didn't inherit anything. And so I learned a lot building from the ground zero. And that got me interested. Oh, this is an area I'd like to learn. And so I studied it. And of course, as a CIO, I probably made my CISO very uncomfortable because I really just want to look over his shoulder. So that's it. And I'm interested in mentoring and coaching because I think at the end of the day, it's the people that matter.
Oh, well said. Well said. And it's a great journey that you had, from the trivia around semiconductors, pretty cool. And then NBN. I think I really like what you just said about the people, but also about curiosity and problem solving. Because on this show, I've been lucky to talk to a lot of smart people, and the one common attribute that I see across is a very curious mindset. And I think if you, especially in the world we currently live in with so much changing every day, artificial intelligence is all the rage these days, but there is so much more. Being curious about how all of these things works is really key. So it's really good to see that that's also been a big part of your own journey. And just with the business transformation, the CIO role, the CISO, the cybersecurity aspect of things, I think you have such a wealth of knowledge. So let's just jump into the first discussion area. Let's just talk about innovation. And what does innovation mean to you? And how do you lead with innovation and impact? So what are your thoughts on that?
Innovation is something new, but something new doesn't have to be something that's created from nothing. So innovation can be from something that exists, but there's always a newness to it. So that to me is innovation. And what spurs innovation is the freedom to think and the time to think and the supporting structures around thinking new things. So reflect of it as a human being in enterprises. We actually really love order, don't we, as human beings? And enterprises would really like to run their business on stable ground. Now imagine when you want to do something new, no matter how small it is, it disrupts the status quo. But something new can lead to better things. And that's where we want to foster innovation. And to foster innovation is to do something that's not quite the comfort zone of human beings, which is order. You've got to allow some mess in the area, to allow some chaos, but in a controlled fashion. So one of the key parts of innovation is the space to be safe. So it starts with psychological safety, which is the team is allowed to think something different, something new. So the thinking mindset around thinking beyond, as we say, thinking beyond the box, thinking outside in, that needs to be fostered. And you foster that by building trust. Now, a lot of leaders say, let's build trust. What are the practical elements of building trust? Is actually in the day-to-day. Can the team trust you with truth? So if there's an incident, can the team trust you with truth, no matter how uncomfortable it may be, no matter if it means exposing someone's mistakes? To me, in the cybersecurity team in particular, that ability to be trusted and to create an environment of trust is important, because we learn from mistakes, and mistakes usually happen if you want to do something new. So create an environment of trust. And I remember my team, when we had incidents, I knew I was trusted with the truth, because they would actually really tell me the context of the situation. And what happens is that as a leader, I have to then balance between operating on that truth, but also making sure that the zone of safety is maintained for my team, where I step out and also share the truth, but make sure that it doesn't become a witch hunt. And actually make sure that my stakeholders, the other executives, don't go into that area at all. It is my leadership area, and I make those calls. And if it happens to be a process that's been broken a few times, then that's for me to provide the discipline. But if it's a matter of an experimentation that went wrong and under my authority, then it's on me to own that. And it's not my team. So that to me is really a key element, because then it moves into doing new things. Now, this is where some order has to be in place, because the risk can get really high if we do too much experimentation and it's all truly chaotic. So creating a space for experimentation means teams, projects, technical environments, and vehicles to launch those new things. And that requires conversation about risk, with business stakeholders. Because when I start to do experimentation, there's always the element where that risk is not just within the IT team or the cybersecurity team. You're putting the business at risk. So therefore, as a leader, it's my responsibility to sell the idea that yes, there is risk, but yes, there's a lot of positive outcomes that could come from this risk. And the way to manage the risk is this. And then and also to select what area can we afford this risk. Yeah. So two things: the mindset of the people and the relationships of trust, but also really the operating model that fosters that thinking.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean, and so much to unpack there, because you're right. I mean, the first part of your answer is, and one of the quotes I always liked is, innovation is not necessarily invention. And I think you brought it up nicely by saying that it doesn't have to be something new. It's not something that you create. It's also innovation. It's also optimizing and making things better that exist. So I think that's really powerful point. And I really like the concept of innovation needs you to have that aspect of being able to try things, because you're trying to change the status quo, because that's the idea. And anytime you try to do that, it's difficult, because we as human beings don't like to be uncomfortable, and any change has the potential to make us uncomfortable, and which is why change is so hard. And I always joke that actually and mean it too, is cybersecurity is essentially a change management exercise for the most part. Is in a lot of cases we are trying to change behaviors for the better, and we need to apply that thinking. So I think that idea of psychological safety, and I like the fact that you brought up the idea that it's you as a leader who fronts it, and while you provide that safety net to your people to let them grow, but you front up any challenges that come your way. And one book which I like, called Extreme Ownership, by Jocko, and I think it's a really good book in terms of driving that leadership mentality of owning outcomes. And I think when you go down the innovation path, yeah, feel free to own things. So I really like that aspect. You touched upon something which I really wanted to dig deeper into, and since you brought it up now, might as well do it at this stage. Is risk. I think cybersecurity, while I mentioned change management, it's largely a risk management exercise as well, because it's all about managing risks. That's what a big part of cybersecurity is. And you mentioned the stakeholders' conversations around formulating risk. I know you are very passionate about cyber risk quantification, and I'm absolutely a big fan of that, because I think we need to get beyond saying high, medium, low to everything, and these red, green, amber things. I think we actually need to talk to a language that business understands, which is the language of risk and financials. So let's dig deeper into that. Talk to me a little bit, Joyce, about cyber risk quantification. What does it mean to you? How have you gone about implementing it sensibly? Because sometimes people can get carried away and try to do everything into the nth degree of perfection, which is not really optimal. So let's hear your thoughts on cyber risk quantification and practically how to do it.
Well, just like I said before, innovation doesn't have to be invention. I thank you for that's actually a really nice phrase. Let's start with how to quantify risk first. So the methodology of it. So Chirag, you have an insurance policy, right? Every one of us, whether it's car or home or even life insurance. So think about having your insurance. What do you think the insurance company does to quantify your risk so they can calculate what premium you can pay that still gives them a profit? So guess what? When you put insurance experts and cybersecurity experts together, what do you think happens?
There we go. You nailed it.
Innovation. So we partnered with another organization, and what's come out of that is we quantify risk according to the methodology and approach that insurance experts use to quantify how they cover our risk. Think about it. You have actuaries modeling risk factors, add AI to it, add data threats, data loss cases around the world. We now have lots of those data. Add threat intelligence, and guess what? You can actually use technology as a powerful way of helping people like us quantify risk. But how do you actually do it practically? Well, don't boil the ocean, like you said. And it's to do with what are the likely risk scenarios that the organization is concerned about. And often people already know that. It's in board reports, it's in risk assessments, it's in third-party audits. And so you look at what are those scenarios that the enterprise is most concerned about, because most likely than not, it's the one that's more prevalent in the industry. They can see it, or they've thought about it and they know that they are quite vulnerable in that area. So start with realistic scenarios. And once you've got those realistic scenarios, then instead of hundreds of potential possibilities, you've narrowed it down to probably 20 really high risk scenarios. And of those 20, start with your top 3 and quantify. The first time you quantify it will be quite mathematically intense, right? There's 2 parts to the equation. It's the likelihood times the impact, and the impact is very mathematical. How many, if you lose business in a day, how much would that cost you?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, if you need to get some forensics investigation in and you have a contract right now, it's usually per day, or and so how much it would cost you to have a forensics team in. And then there's an estimate of an incident like this might mean 5 to 10 days of forensics, or maybe 30 if you haven't got a detection mechanism that's fast enough, quick enough, and it's already pervaded over your network. So those kinds of things are quite straightforward, and anyone with a calculator or an Excel would be able to at least do something. But the left side of the equation is the probability or the likelihood. And this is where our concept of quantification is slightly different from the usual, because I would not use probability as the probability of an event, but your susceptibility when the event occurs. The probability of an event is out of your control, out of my control if I'm running an enterprise. But the susceptibility of my enterprise to such an event is impacted by how many controls I have, how effective are they, and are they more advanced than the usual, so slightly ahead of what the criminals have. And from that comes the science, the actuarial modeling. But nevertheless, with or without the actuarial modeling, the right side of the equation should be within reach of any enterprise. They should be able to calculate the impact on a raw basis.
Yeah. And I think I really like a lot of points you brought up there, especially around the susceptibility. I think it's really your control posture that can dictate that. So, often there is a philosophical discussion on can cybersecurity controls, can they reduce the likelihood and impact, or just the likelihood, not impact? And I think it's really, you can reduce both of those because there are controls for both of those. And I think that's where, to your point, there is so much. And I think that's something which is such an important point we started talking about people and we started talking about essentially elements of culture when it comes to leadership. And I think to change culture, you need to give people a sense of control. I think I have been not a big fan of the fear messaging around cybersecurity. I've spoken about that multiple times. I think if you scare people, you essentially freeze them into inaction. You want people to engage, you want them to act, and I think that comes from giving them hope and some positive messages. And when you give them a message of actually by improving your control posture, you reduce the susceptibility, which improves your risk position and actually puts you in a better position. I think that's a good message. But I think where a problem arises, and I'm keen to get your thoughts, is where things go wrong is when cybersecurity is not engaging with the business effectively. Because if you think of cybersecurity, or if you run cybersecurity as just a technical exercise, or tools, technologies, vulnerabilities, scans, findings, if that's really all there is to it, the problem arises that you don't know what the business values of what brings in the revenue, what processes exist, when is that peak business period where all hands need to be on deck. Those things can only come about with those conversations with business, not just with technology. So I think to even come to that point of what you were saying with quantifying that financially, cyber risk quantification, it can serve as a very effective cultural tool as well, because you start to get people engaged. When you now start talking dollars and cents, that always gets attention more than random, subjective, high, medium, low type assessments. So now I'm very keen to understand from you, Joyce, following on that chain of thought, is what are the challenges you see for effective quantification, and where have you, in your experience of these decades, seen a breakthrough where that aha moment went off in someone's mind? Okay, I get it, what I need to do to actually make this useful.
The challenge is for cybersecurity teams to break out of their shell and to actually engage the business. It's always hard when you do it, maybe not for the first time, but you do it in a different way.
Yeah.
And I believe that quantifying cyber risk and speaking about how and the benefits with business stakeholders will help bridge that gap, because inviting them to be part of the quantification project means that they're there when the scenarios are selected or when the scenarios are being defined. So they're no longer just cyber loss scenarios from the cybersecurity team's perspective, but they're actually business loss scenarios that happen to be instigated by a cyber event. Just like a shifted a bit. And the breakthroughs I've seen is that bringing the business in actually creates a couple of things. One, buy-in, because they're involved. But secondly, and I think very importantly, certain scenarios are surfaced that the cyber team have not thought of because they had not thought about a business capability impairment view. So an impairment of a business capability is broad. And when a business stakeholder comes in and says, this is a main business capability, and as you mentioned, during a peak season of revenue, then coming from that perspective could be 3 or 4 scenarios. Yeah. Right? And the cyber team have never thought of it being a combination of those scenarios, potentially impairing the business in a serious way.
Yeah.
So engaging the business stakeholders in the quantification project and helping them articulate what really worries them in terms of business impairment is important to creating the scenarios that are realistic. And then what happens is that sometimes the cyber team is the one that actually handles the calculation, because it needs some degree of understanding of the controls. But in some companies that have already had that engagement, you'll be surprised. People in risk would like to participate. right? They'd like to really understand how you estimate its susceptibility. They'd like to understand why MFA and not just passwords actually improve the access part of your control. So it was because it does, one without the other, putting MFA in on top of having, managing your password, it's just very basic. But we've seen that over the time, when you have those two controls together, it's stronger than just the one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think too, it's really that key. And you brought up the risk teams, and I completely agree. Cyber risk quantification or cyber risk profiles, cyber risk frameworks, they need to go hand in hand and be part of the enterprise risk management process. They cannot exist in isolation because key executives, business executives, boards, they understand risk. It's not new to them. They've been doing this for as long as businesses have been around in some shape or form. So they get it. So it's not. That's where I recently put a video on LinkedIn, and I spoke in a different language. I spoke in Gujarati, and I said to people is, if you don't speak Gujarati, you would have had no idea what I just said. And that's sometimes how cybersecurity people can talk. It's all technical language. It's all acronyms. You talk PAM, MDR, EDR, zero trust, and business is lost. It's like, what are you saying? And I think that's the problem, is that translation risk can be a very powerful way of translating, and especially when you combine with financials. So, lots of valuable insights for the audience there in terms of how they can approach cyber risk quantification, that they don't have to come up with some magical tool or some big framework. It's a lot of the basics when done right, and engagement will get you in a reasonable position. Then you can build upon that further. So Joyce,
there's one other thing, Chirag. I'm working with a team at the moment, and the use of cyber risk quantification actually extends into stress testing cyber insurance. So they know that in the next few months they will renew their cyber insurance, and it's likely to rise. But without cyber risk quantification, they wouldn't be able to put together a storyline about whether it's actually justified to increase cyber insurance, or whether it's actually better to have that investment into the cybersecurity program. And risk quantification gives you that powerful, means to have that conversation.
Oh, yeah, really, really good point. And cyber insurance, as we know, is causing a lot of challenges for organizations. To your point, but this is where you can control some outcomes, because if you have a good posture, if you're able to quantify that, justify that, have a defensible program, it helps you in so many ways, and insurance being one of them. So, really good point there, Joyce. So, Joyce, I know, respectful of the time, so a couple of things I do want to get your thoughts on. So, one is, we talked about innovation in cybersecurity. We focused on risk aspect. Are there any other areas in cybersecurity that, from your vantage point, you think are ripe for innovation?
Definitely, but not in the technical sphere. I think the way we educate and train people in cybersecurity is so ripe for innovation. And even the certification process itself is so ripe for innovation. I don't have an answer, but I think the more people talk about it to come up with an industry-wide answer, the better for all of us. What I do know is that learning it in a theoretical sense in TAFE or university is not getting people to a point where they can do the job on day one. So if that is not the case, and it takes long to wait for people to finish, then there must be alternative ways of actually getting people into the field. And one way could be that we have many mature age workers with a lot of experience, diversity in the way they think, and the experiences that they have. And when we think about risk, the more cognizant someone is of the broader picture, the higher the ability to connect dots that may be kind of outside of another person's perspective. And risk is about connecting dots. Connecting dots. And so we need to think about utilizing those who are experienced in other fields and bringing them up to a point where they can actually be in cybersecurity. Yeah.
Really, brilliant insight there, and I completely agree. I think the whole education aspect of it needs a bit of a rethink. There is so much we can get. There are so many transferable skills, to your point, from other areas that we can bring in. In fact, when I did my first book, I talked about the fact that neuroscience, psychology, public health have solved a lot of these issues and have given us so much more insight that can be applied to cybersecurity. I mean, this whole idea of leading with fear is a bad idea. I mean, that has come about by so many studies in other disciplines. So definitely a lot we can get there. And I also think, to your point, there are some core skills that we need to get better at in terms of getting people industry ready, and that'll come with partnerships. But yeah, it's no silver bullet to it, right? Just because you get a certification or you passed a course doesn't make you necessarily ready. I think we need to educate more about real world use cases in cybersecurity and career paths. There is not this one magical path. Not everybody needs to be a CISO. Not everybody wants to be a CISO. Not everybody should be a CISO. And I think it's if we make cybersecurity all about that, just that path, it's not the right outcome. There is so much we can deliver in terms of value to solve the problems around cybersecurity. And they're not technical problems, to your point. They're problems that are engagement problems, risk problems, visibility problems, strategic problems. I think there's so much we can get there. So a really good insight. So
Yes.
Joyce, I'll probably close on this question, and it's kind of a two-part question. One is, you had this remarkable career, which you done so many different things across different industry verticals. You mentioned curiosity as one of the things that has really helped you. Are there any others that really feed this growth mindset? And along those lines, what advice would you, and some maybe two or three key points you would give to mid-level managers or mid-level professionals to reach that next level, to become executives, to be effective in those roles? So what do you think about this two-part question?
Is there anything else? Well, without courage, and I know you've probably heard it before, curiosity and courage, they need to be hand in hand. And courage doesn't really mean, jumping off a cliff. I don't think cybersecurity experts would do that anyway. we're so, we have different risk profiles, but it's about gauging your readiness for it, and not to wait until you're completely ready. That's what I would call it. There is no such thing as completely ready. There is no such thing as having all of the qualifications, having all of the experience. I would say if you've got 6 or 7 out of 10, go for it and make sure that you know what your strengths are, because you're going to leverage those strengths a lot and at a higher level than you've leveraged them before. So when we think about stakeholder engagement, stakeholder management, managing conflict, being able to handle a crucial conversation, one might think, I've done that. I've done that over many projects. But when you step up to a different domain, well, yes, you've done that, but remember, you can also mature the same skill set. So I can handle a crucial conversation, but I tell you, every new crucial conversation is a learning situation for me. There's always room to just continue improving, continue thinking about how you could have managed that more in a more successful way. And so with curiosity and courage comes humility. if you want to be a continuous learner, there needs to be, I think it's like you can't do that without being humble, meaning that you don't know everything. You are not everything, and you are not everyone. So humility is a third component of that. And as somebody just said, reverse mentoring. Get younger people to mentor you because they have other things to give to the situation. Now, you talked about middle level staff when they're wanting to expand and improve their career. It really is just an expression of all those three. I think not waiting to be asked to solve a problem is one of the things I did. Because I just love solving problems. It didn't really matter. And this might be controversial. It didn't really matter whether it was on my name or not. Because I continuously helped others solve problems. The people were aware of my approach, and often they can see that there probably was a Joyce Harkness input to it, even though it was, helping someone else. And it doesn't matter. In the end, if you are a problem solver, there's more that comes from within. It's like never-ending streams of innovation and creativity. And so if you give some to others, don't worry, because you can be a never-ending stream yourself. And then the second one is get feedback. I think we can sometimes think too highly of ourselves. Yeah, and we fear feedback. We're worried about, hearing bad news. But a trusted colleague, a trusted advisor, a trusted mentor, their feedback is like gold. So seek those, because there's always room to improve, there's always room to grow, and there are always opportunities. And so if you seek feedback, you can actually, it can lead to opportunities.
Well, Joyce, so much wisdom in what you mentioned. I think all of that feedback resonates with, personally with me, in terms of decisions that I have made. To your point, you were never truly ready. You got to back yourself, but you also need to know what you don't know and be humble in that. Never be shy of saying, I don't know, but I want to learn. I think that is important, because if you think you have all the answers, you're in the wrong business. I think none of us do. And I think it's really important to acknowledge that. But yeah, really that courage point resonates with me so much. So many people, I feel, are caught up with imposter syndrome. They become, in their mind, they've put all the limitations on themselves of what they can do and what they cannot do. And I almost feel like challenge yourself to beat them. It's you are in a unique position. You've done something right to be at a middle manager level. You had those skills that brought you up here, but what got you up here may not get you to the next step. And I think that's where all these things that you mentioned come in so handy. So Joyce, I want to, deeply say thank you for all your time. It's been an amazing conversation, just so many valuable nuggets of information through this, and just your approach to solving problems, just how methodically, calmly you tackle so many different issues. So much to learn from you. So I'm very grateful. Thank you so much for your time. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in, and see you at the next episode. Thanks, Joyce.
Thank you too.